I feel privileged to speak at a center like this in Britain, in Europe, at what I must say seems to me to be a challenging moment for the Jewish people and a challenging moment for all of us who believe so deeply in democratic tolerance, in free societies. These are truly challenging times. Groups of people like this coming together, centers like this one, I believe make a very important contribution. But my expertise, if I have any expertise, and my experience is not in matters of faith or even in matters of politics and matters of security, but rather in matters of economics. And what I want to discuss with you tonight is three propositions. First, the centrality of economic issues to the success of all our nations in the years ahead. Second, the large challenges that we have from an economic perspective in the industrial world, in particular, the threats of secular stagnation and of rising inequality. And third, I want to talk a little bit about what can, and I believe must, be done, though I will have to record the judgment that I am much less than certain that what I think needs to be done will be done, especially on the European continent. I would suggest this historical generalization. Countries where the middle class is seeing steady increases in their standard of living, and where parents can confidently look forward to their children living materially better and more prosperous lives than they did, almost without exception, are success stories. Conversely, where that objective is not being achieved, it is rare for other objectives to be achieved either. And faith in the system of government, even when it is democratic, diminishes. Ponder this. The popularity rating of Xi Jinping or the popularity rating of Vladimir Putin is in excess of the approval rating of the US Congress plus the British Parliament. The latter sum, since the US Congress is at 16%, can safely be assumed to be below 70%. And the approval rating of Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping is a higher figure. There's a set of stories involved with nationalism, that have to do with why Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are so popular. But what's more important for my purpose tonight is to remark on the lack of faith, lack of trust in the major institutions of our democratic societies in the United States, in Britain, in continental Europe, and in Japan. And I would suggest that that failure, that lack of trust, has its roots in the fact that real wages have barely increased for average workers in 15 years and haven't increased very much in 30 in the United States and in Britain. It relates to the fact that median family incomes have grown only quite slowly in our countries after adjusting for inflation. And it relates to the fact that everywhere in the industrial world, the fraction of men who are not working has risen quite sharply. Americans are much healthier and less likely to be disabled than they were when I was a child. And yet, when I was a child in the mid-1960s, if you looked at American men, and the figures are not wildly different for Britain, 5% of men between the ages of 25 and 54 were not working. Today, the figure is 15%, 3 times as high. There are more men in the United States in their mid-40s who are on disability insurance than there are who are doing production work in manufacturing. This kind of change, where parents do not and cannot look forward to better lives for their children, it is understandable that it undermines trust. Again, to take an American figure, and there are elements of this problem in Britain as well, the gap in college attendance rates between the children of the rich and the children of the poor is considerably greater today than it was when I graduated from college in 1975. Many propose that social insurance programs, like Social Security, have their retirement age increased. And indeed, the argument is that they have to have their retirement age increased because, after all, life expectancy is much longer. Here's the rub. For the kind of people who are in this room, life expectancy at age 55 is about 6 years longer than it was in 1965. For those below the median income and education in the population, it is about 1 year above what it was in 1965. And so our economies, in a short-run sense, have not fully recovered from the financial crisis. Yes, Britain is growing rapidly. Yes, it is growing rapidly, as President Obama and Prime Minister Cameron celebrated. But it is growing rapidly mostly because of how deep a hole it was in. Today in Britain, GDP is only about 1% greater than it was before the financial crisis happened 7 years ago. That means you are a long way, more than 10% below the trend line that existed before the financial crisis. Something similar is true in the United States. We've done somewhat better. We're also about 10% below that trend line, but we're about 7% above where we were at the previous peak. So it is a huge achievement, one for which many deserve great credit, and I'm pleased to have had a chance to help a very little bit. That a situation that in 2008 could have become another round of the Great Depression, with unemployment approaching 20% or beyond, nothing remotely like that happened. But to say that the lights did not go out is not to say that economic performance, in terms either of overall economic growth or in terms of the distribution of that growth, has been satisfactory. It is not to say that the deep structural problems that led to rising joblessness and relative stagnation in middle-class incomes that preceded the crisis have not been exacerbated during this period of crisis. And I would suggest to you that there are very few, if any, examples of societies that have stayed successful, cohesive, and peaceful without the ability to produce stable increases in income for middle-class families.